I am good. Thank you so much for joining this Day 3 Virtual Summit 2026. So, looking forward for your presentation. So, before you start your presentation, I would like to introduce you to the audience. So, welcome on stage, Richardson Shirovich. He is a corporate sage, spiritual coach, speaker, best-selling author, and leadership mentor with over 40 years of global corporate leadership experience and 3 decades of spiritual practice. He helps professionals integrate spirituality with authentic leadership to achieve high performance while maintaining balance, purpose, and inner peace. Through his coaching, writing, and speaking, which empowers leaders to align their careers with their deepest values and authentic selves. So, this is the introduction of Richard Slovich. So, yes, the stage is all yours. Good luck.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to share my screen. If you could tell me when you see it sharing.
Sure,
We'll make
sir.
sure it comes through. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see.
Oh, fabulous. I love it when technology comes together. It is such a delight and honor to have been invited to present and speak here today at this wonderful conference and summit here. I was here last year and really enjoyed it. So I'm going to talk about my theme is, it shows here, the corporate sage, gracefully integrating spirituality for authentic leadership. My screen is sharing. I wish I could see you to connect with you deeper here, but a sage is one distinguished for wisdom. And so the theme here is around those who are corporate leaders in any kind of level who are also spiritual seekers and yearning to bring your authentic leadership of who you really are into the role that your corporate career is your spiritual path. And I'm going to dive deep. I'm going to talk a little bit more about what all of that means and how my path has evolved on that, and hopefully might be used in service to you. So, real quick about my own, I call it graceful journey. By day, I tell people I've got, as was mentioned, I've a 40-year career in global business leadership. I started out in computer science and software development, career in IT project management and program management, leading governance teams. I was in HR. I managed global matrix teams all over the world to deliver IT services, and business management, leading strategy, governance, process definition, all of those kinds of things, and all the challenges that go along with that over the last 40 years. So I tell you that's by day. By night, I've been on a 30-year spiritual journey. And if you ask people at work about my spiritual journey, most everybody, except for a few confidants, would never know I was on this, because the first and foremost thing about the spiritual journey is it's an inner journey. And I had been led and guided to numerous different things along this journey. I didn't always know I was on a spiritual journey, but things started showing up. I went through a 4-year energy healing training and a 4-year core energetic certification, which is a body centered somatic psychotherapy, and coach training. I've been on vision quests and had profound insights, many spiritual and religious retreats, a long term relationship with working with a one on one spiritual advisor. I have an engineering system thinking kind of mindset. Yet this is not your typical engineer, as I found. There was a deeper spiritual calling that was occurring for me, that it found me, I didn't find it, if you will. And in many regards, in the corporate world, I was feeling like I would call it a beacon of light surrounded by darkness, walking down the corporate halls. Maybe some of you might have experienced and felt this. But I want you to notice a couple of things around my language that I've been using right now. And that is a spiritual split. Here I am already talking about by day I do this, and by night I do this woo stuff. Little bit of a split there. And I felt like a beacon of light surrounded by darkness. Ooh, that one was a tough one for me to finally realize. No, I'm only surrounded by light. It's my own images and judgments around what I believe is darkness around me. And I'll get into that a little bit more here. So here's what we're going to cover today. The split. I call it there's a pathless path, the heartache call, and my own story in this a little bit. We'll go into who are you really at your deepest spiritual level. And the spiritual path, as I said, is an inner journey to your own inner divinity and real self. And the pathless path of grace. Your divinity infused within you internally and expresses to yourself in the world, expressed externally out into the world in your career. And I'll get into grace in a bit. So a little story of mine. So I was working in a large global company, and as happens many times, resource actions, or we call them layoffs, were occurring. And I was an HR manager managing many people. And over a 2-year time period, I needed to lay off some 28 people. It is the most difficult and devastating thing for a manager to do. First off, you're the one who needs to choose who in your department is going to have that occur. You know you're deeply affecting people's lives. Second, I need to figure out who am I going to let go so that I can keep the business still running with not having enough people in the business to keep it going. A little bit of management stress there. And last, it's actually being on the phone call and reading the corporate legal script. And when I was doing it, everyone was working at home, so it was all over the phone. It wasn't even personal. I remember one person in particular that I had to lay off. And I'm reading the script saying this has to do with the companies needing to readjust resources and those with performance and things like that. And I'm talking to someone that year I had already given them the highest performance rating you could possibly get. And also, I had moved them into the position that they had because it was more leadership, and I really needed that person to be in that position for what we had going on into the future. And here I am reading the script, telling them this is about their performance. Well, in my heart, I knew the truth. The truth was I still would have had to choose this person because the truth was they were in the wrong position at the wrong time. And I put them there. This was a moment, I would call it an existential crisis for me. It was really had me questioning at my deep level my own real self values versus the corporate identity and responsibilities that the corporation expected of me. As I said, it was an existential crisis. And I'm going to stop the story right here. Maybe some of you have had to do some of these kinds of things. I'm going to pick it up a little bit later in the presentation. So our corporate world today, many of you might live in this already. It's a challenging corporate world today. And I've heard some other presentations talk a lot about this, but the statistics are from Gallup. Only 31% of employees are actually actively engaged, and 17% are actively disengaged. They're just walking into work just as a place to go to. The employees are feeling disengaged, and there's another acronym for this, VUCA, which stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. That's the world we live in today, in a pace of change that is growing exponentially. So many employees are facing burnout, chronic stress, a toxic political environment. And when in the new world order with AI and quantum computing on the horizons, many people are feeling so extremely overwhelmed. So here I am right in front of you saying, your corporate career is your spiritual path. And boy, I didn't know that at the beginning here whatsoever. And you might even be looking at that saying, I'm not sure how those things come together. But having walked both worlds for multiple decades, there was a place where the spiritual path found me and helped me integrate them in a way I never could have planned. In essence, I wasn't in control. Boom. First spiritual lesson for me to realize along the way. That was a hard one to learn. I might think I have a plan, but ultimately source, God is in control of all the direction. So your spiritual nature, and again, I didn't call it spirituality in the beginning, but who are we really? And what's our identity and purpose as we're here? Well, there's a couple ways and perspectives to be able to answer that. And the first way is, I'm sorry. And first part I should have said was our spiritual nature. Let's talk about what is spirituality, because it can mean many, many different things to different people. So here's what I mean by spirituality that I'm going to use. Spirituality is your direct connection to source or God. We are of spirit. We're not just flesh and bones. There's something beyond us. The Jesuit priest Pierre Teilhard de Chardin says, we are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We're spiritual beings having a human experience. And there's something beyond us. And it also implies, if you will, that we have an inner belief in something beyond us, whether that's a God that we believe in, or the creator, or the universe, or another name that we give that. Maybe it's our higher self, but we believe there is something beyond us. And as we're spirit, there's an analogy, I believe it's in Hindu analogy, you might equate God to being the infinite cosmic ocean of everything out there. And we as humans are individual waves on that cosmic ocean. So spirituality is our relationship as individual waves to the ocean, such that we are being infused with qualities of the ocean, like a deep sense of inner peace that already exists within us, and inner contentment and fulfillment within. Some of those types of qualities that take a while to fully integrate on the spiritual path. And if you're developing your relationship to source, it's natural to also be exploring life's deeper questions. What is your deepest meaning and purpose of it to be human here in the world and in our relationship to God? And what does it mean to live from your real self and divine essence and knowing your core essence and divinity within? So that's what I mean by spirituality. And in the corporate world, spirituality needs to be practical. It doesn't necessarily mean incense and candles, although it can. That's not me. It can if that's your nature. But then, are you a spiritual seeker? And again, I didn't know I was a spiritual seeker in the beginning, but what tends to happen is that there is a yearning for a deeper meaning in all you do. You're wanting to know the real purpose and meaning of everything that's happening underneath you. You might be a lifelong learner drawn to introspection and inner growth. For me, I can tell you, I was buying every self-help and spirituality book out there. I was attending retreats, as I said, I was finding these different things that just synchronistically started showing up. I didn't know in the beginning they were actually connected. But there was also, for me, in the beginning, a sense of inner disconnect, content that was clawing in my heart. It was almost like this silent inner voice that kept saying, there's got to be a better way. That inner voice is what kept drawing me to finding something. Originally, it was help drawing me to maybe a meditation retreat so I could go into silence and recharge. I didn't realize back then, again, a little split here, that was trying to escape from the intensity and pressure and anxiety in the corporate world. But I later found out along the path that inner discontent in my heart was actually my calling. It was the spiritual path calling me. I didn't find it. And along this way, one of the things that I find, and many of you might have found the thing, is once you're awakened to it and you see and know a better way, you can't stop. I know I've tried. I tried to stop listening to my intuitive senses and saying, I don't have time for this. I've got a project plan I need to complete. But the intensity and pressure in my heart will only continue to grow until I have to start listening to it. So who are you really? Your true identity and purpose? As I said, one way to answer this is look at your life right now. There's multiple levels of how to answer this question. You are already today the living answer to your true identity and purpose. Look at how you live your life right now. What are your beliefs, the roles that you have, your relationships? Every part of your life is the current answer to who you are. Because this is what's happening. And your purpose is based around this at one level. And you might even be at a level of, I want my purpose to be around what my passion is and what I'm doing in the corporate career. That is also a valid purpose that you're currently at, or you might be striving for. And there is a higher level answer to this. And scripture tells us this in a couple of different ways. Scripture of Matthew, ye are the light of the world. We are born in the image and likeness of God. That means we have a spark of the divine that is already within us. It might be covered up by many layers, but it is already there. It's our North Star, and it's our beacon to head toward in developing on the spiritual graph and growing and realizing and knowing within. So your true and highest identity and purpose extends so much more than your current job title. And this is where, many people do have something like a midlife crisis. They realize in life the working up the corporate ladder is okay, but they found going up those levels didn't bring them to fulfillment that they thought it might, or maybe they might even be let go. And now they might have tied their identity to that being a vice president or something like else. And that might even be the trigger for a new spiritual path for them to be awakened and opened up. So your real self is this divine light and your unique expression, because everyone is created by our Creator, by our God, with a unique nature of natural talents, strengths, and abilities, and those infused with the light is your real self. You might not know it today, and it might even be a lifelong journey to fully realizing and knowing. But this is who you really are. Now on this, I've worked with many, many different, I've learned things from many different Eastern and Western Christian and other religious orders around some things around a pathless path to growing our deeper connection to Source and God within. And I'm going to call this the pathless path. And one part of the path is deepening our perspectives, our changes of our beliefs in life to a deeper level and inner peace. And there's four steps to this of different perspectives. And the first one is surrender. This is the letting go over what you cannot change. I'm going to read this. The serenity prayer is perfect in this. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. It doesn't mean not doing anything and not working hard to making things happen. But the prayer from St. Augustine says it perfectly. Work as though everything depends on you. Pray as though everything depends on God, especially the outcomes. We still have to work, but we might be inspired by God along the way. And the other saying that is really relevant here is let go, let God. The second perspective is faith. This is trusting that the challenge that are coming to me serve a higher purpose. There's a deep intuitive knowing with faith that everything that's happening is happening for a much bigger reason. And that reason is fundamentally good for me in the long run. It might not look like it in the moment, especially if something devastating is happening. There's another phrase, life happens for me, not to me. The third perspective is patience. That is accepting a divine timing in all things. Or this too shall pass. It's a it's a deep sense that all things have their own time. And in Ecclesiastes, to everything there is a season and a time to every purpose under heaven. I wish I had known about this early in my project management career. I used to put a lot of self-inflicted anxiety and stress on myself trying to meet what was always and typically an unrealistic project deadline. And many times I would push the team and myself to make it with a lot of stress. And sometimes we didn't make it. And you know what? When we didn't make it, many times the world did not fall apart. We recommitted. And boy, I wish I had known that lesson a lot longer, a lot earlier, that I didn't have to manage the projects, putting all that anxiety on myself. It was going to work out. But this took time, and I kept needing to relearn that lesson over time. And then there's acceptance, releasing resistance to what is. All of these are very, very hard to learn. But the acceptance is turning over to God and accepting whatever God gives us in our jobs, in our life, etc. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, in her research on death and dying, talks about acceptance being the last stage of grief. So in surrender, you try as hard as you can and turn the outcome over to God. And now you have faith knowing that there's a higher purpose for everything occurring, and then patience to endure what's occurring, and acceptance with whatever is happening naturally leads to developing an inner state of peace. Now, notice one of the things I really want to be clear, all four of those don't happen one at a time. They're all happening in parallel. And there's a missing ingredient that sort of pulls it all together. But I call this the pathless path. And I love this quote here by Joseph Campbell. If you can see the path laid out in front of you, step by step, you know it's not your path. Your own path you make with every step you take. And I'll add a little bit onto the end of that. And sometimes it's as you're stepping into the new step and falling, hoping that the ground comes up to meet you. And so you can't put together a plan to actually grow all those perspectives that I just showed you. Grace is the other ingredient that leads the way. And here's a quote that I found from Cheryl Richardson that I love. Cheryl Richardson is it's a coaching industry thought leader. It's a benevolent force of energy, grace, has been available and direct your life all along. Grace leads us to the exact experiences we need at exactly the right time. And I'll add, inclusive of all the experiences that are currently occurring for you at work. So here's a little model I came up with. Again, a model doesn't show the reality exactly. It's only a simulation for what helpful for what our minds can understand, which is typically a mystery of what's occurring. So this is the grace pot. And the container of that pot, the thickness of it is dependent on spiritual practices. So I've listed here meditation, prayer, selfless service, contemplation, practicing the presence. That is thinking of a thought or a name, maybe it's God or other names or inner peace, and constantly repeating it over and over. Your commitment to spiritual practices sort of tells the universe or God, now you're ready for spiritual maturity on this path. And in the grace pot are all those perspectives and other qualities that I just mentioned of surrender, faith, patience, acceptance, your identity, peace, compassion. And grace is leading the way, bringing to you experiences and events for you to learn how to respond to them, growing those spiritual qualities along the way. They're ultimately leading to a level of deep inner peace. And in this, as I found personally, spontaneous events, I call them human angels, would show up in my life to help me, or synchronicities, or something else helped me along the way, an inspiration that woke me up at 2 a.m. and I just had to write it down to help me through this. So let me give you another example of how this was working for me. I'll come back to my story. I had just finished laying people off, and the stress and anxiety is extremely hard in me. And I went to my doctor because I was feeling stress, pressure in my chest. So I talked to my doctor about this, and he refers me to a cardiologist, and I get some further testing. And lo and behold, the very next day, I'm in the hospital, and they're putting a stent into a coronary artery that was 99% blocked. Now, under this kind of stress here, it's pretty common that people will say it typically is going to affect your health some way in the long term. And that's what happened to me. My doctors told me I was very lucky to catch this when we did. No, I was very blessed, is the other perspective of it. And this caused me to go into further parts of my path that I didn't know I was being pulled on. So I've understood that going through something like this, it's very common to go into depression, which I did. And I needed to see a psychiatrist with medication and a counselor, and other things started showing up for me. I really was questioning what is the deeper meaning in life. And all of a sudden, a book shows up to me called Synchronicities, which I read it, and it talked about vision quests and the experience that this person had on it. Well, I started researching and looking for vision quests, and lo and behold, I found one that was very close to me. And the next thing I know, I signed up for it. And I found myself in the woods by myself with me and Jesus as my mentor talking to me and giving me a whole lot of spiritual direction and guidance. From that experience, it was profound. And I kept looking at, well, what do I do with that now? And that's when Cheryl Richardson's book showed up for me, giving me this quote and telling me about a meditation retreat, which I looked up and found it wasn't far from me. And the leader of it also had a number of books, and I put those books on my Amazon list. A week later, I looked on my bookshelf, and there it was. I'd read it 15 years earlier. It was highlighted all over the place. And boom, whack on the side of the head, synchronicity showing up again. I signed up for their retreats, and the leader of it became my spiritual advisor director for the last 10 years now. This event at work brought me to this whole place for helping guiding me to a deeper level of spiritual connection to source within and all of those qualities that we've talked to. I'm not smart enough to have planned this out. But I am now so grateful for those events at work that occurred for me. And other qualities started coming through for me at work here, such as, you know, a crisis client situation started coming through. I started having a level of intuition that started coming through me where I could hold a negotiation with a client and I'll find myself dancing in the moment. And at the end, the client is very happy, and people come to me and say, "How did you do that to know to go in that way?" And I have to say, "I don't know. It just came through me." Or others things started to come through where my own natural authentic leadership started coming through. My performance reviews started getting better. I wasn't perfect here. I would fall off the wagon many times and get back up again. But something around my authentic leadership started coming through even more. And that's where we start talking through here about the wise sage that starts coming through into your authentic leadership journey along the way. And it first started off with leading with grace. Other spiritual traditions call surrender, faith, patience, acceptance the divine feminine path. And authentic leadership, then, yes, Harvard Business Review will talk about authentic leadership and how you can grow it. Leadership development programs are very effective and good, and they are acceptable. And there's a deeper level of them, which is going through this journey, infusing that divine light with your unique nature into your real self starts to shine through in a way that you can't expect. As I said, people started noticing and coming to me because they wanted me as a coach or a mentor. And many times I started losing my fear of speaking up to executives and telling them uncomfortable truths, the truths that others were afraid to tell them. Yet I knew things were going to evolve for me perfectly no matter what. So what's the worst case that could happen? Things would evolve for me okay. So I did speak up, and many of those executives were so appreciative of me telling them this. Not always, not always did it work out, but I knew I had a foundation of my identity and purpose that was based off of my relationship to God within, not who I thought I was at work. And so there's the integrating of this real self into the pathless path that I just defined, where you start integrating and your corporate sage wisdom starts to come through with a foundation of deep presence, peace, and wisdom within. Externally, that shows up as your true authentic leadership and a level of creativity that starts coming through that everyone notices, and that brings you to a level of fulfillment within. So I think I'm running over a little bit here. I'm going to wrap up just to say one practice that I want to recommend is commit to a spiritual daily practice, even if it's only for 5 minutes. Practice meditation or prayer just for 5 minutes. Maybe you've got one that's longer than this, but it will be the beginnings for you. And be the corporate sage, not do or learn the corporate sage. Allow the corporate sage, wise woman, to be allowed and flow through who you already are on this path. If you'd like to connect with me, here's my website. I wrote a book called The Corporate Sage: Gracefully Integrating Spirituality for Authentic Leadership. I describe my own path and journey in a much deeper way through this. It's also a workbook for you. You can find it on Amazon or at this link. I'm on LinkedIn, and here's my email address. The QR code. I hope this has been of service to you, and I'd like to continue to be of service. And so the QR code can take you to, I've opened up my calendar for a free 30-minute, no pressure type of spiritual coaching session where we will talk about what's the deepest level of what's holding you back from integrating spirituality into your corporate career. I love to have these conversations. Again, there's no pressure on any of this. It's just to have a dialogue about and coaching session around that. When you enter this, you enter into the information field, win 2026. And I am so honored and delighted to have been here. Thank you, and I hope this has been helpful to you. I'm going to stop sharing. I think we open this up for questions now.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Richard, for the great insights you have shared with our audience today. So, you completely drew the audience attention with your presentation. So, there are a lot of questions in the chat. So, I would like to take multiple questions for you. So,
Great.
how do you define authentic leadership and why is it important in today's corporate world?
Well, it is, I can't quote what Harvard Business Review and others say. I've researched it and read it, and it's a long definition. And it's wonderful. It's great. It's about being who you already are without masking that in the corporate world. It's bringing your natural talents and gifts. And the level of authentic leadership that I talk about here is don't dismiss that. Don't dismiss what the research will say, and leadership will develop and help you grow. Many times there's 360 assessments and other kinds of things for you to help and grow on. But take it now to a deeper spiritual level. Integrate that with your real self, your true nature of who you really are. And again, I said, this is a pathless past. You can't simply say, I'm going to put together a project plan to grow my real self. It comes through grace naturally, such that your real self of who you already are designed to be starts coming through almost holistically and wholly and naturally through yourself. I've known what my strengths and talents are, but I've held those back many times. And as I went through the spiritual path more and more, I lost the fear and anxiety of allowing myself to be seen in the light. Again, in the corporate world, you're not going to use the word light because that's not a word that the corporate world generally uses. But inside yourself, in your own inner journey, it's perfectly appropriate for yourself. Is there any
So
other
much for
questions?
explaining very detailed for this question, sir. And so, one more question for you. How can spiritual intelligence enhance ethical decision making during times of uncertainty and change?
Yeah, there's a lot of change out there, and there is a um, huge amount going on where you might be put into positions of ethical decision making. Can I really do this? Right? And spiritual intelligence, in some regard, as I talked about the spiritual path, a level of intuition that is a deep sense of inner knowing. That was my inner compass of how I had to operate, started coming through where I could look at this situation and ask myself, does this morally match my inner values and my inner compass? And many times it doesn't. But there's so many other ways and perspectives that also can be looked at. For instance, the Dalai Lama has always said in the spiritual perspective, there is always a third way. It's never one way or the other or black and white. There's always a third way through that intuition will help you start to recognize and see along the way. I call that the true spiritual intelligence that's guiding me based off of my foundation of who I know I really am. There are times the corporate world is going to require you to do things because the company needs it done this way that might be against your values. And yes, you might still have to do that. I'm not saying the answer is I have to quit this job and leave. You might still have to do that. And the reality for me is I needed the corporate paycheck. In personally in my own family, I have, a family that I needed to support. a daughter who was autistic and had tremendous health financial needs that were occurring. There's a corporate paycheck that's very real for people, and I needed to make and do things, like I said, were against my moral values. But look what happened for me. It brought me on a spiritual journey that was designed just for me in laying people off and the depression I did that I couldn't have planned. So you might actually have to make decisions that are against different from your values. And if you stay, how do you resolve those so that it doesn't break you down? Well, it might take you down a little bit. That's the reality of spiritual path. Sometimes it's called the dark night of the soul. And transformation happens on the other side.
Thank you. Thank you, Richard, for answering this question in a very detailed manner. So, thank you so much for joining and share your wonderful presentation about the corporate stage, spirituality, and yeah, ethical decision making, and lot to the audience. So, yeah, please do encourage our next speaker sessions as well with your questions and valuable suggestions. So, yeah, this is our third virtual summit. Day three virtual summit at 2026. So, looking forward to hear from you for more conferences. Thank you and have a great day.
Thank you. It's honor to be here.
We are so honored to be you are on the stage. So everybody, please do join our next speaker, Denley. So he's already waiting in the backstage.